Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to the APM Wickham and Scotland branch collaborative webinar to kick off the first International Women's Day event. Please help me by sharing your excitement to describe how you're feeling about the webinar using an animal in the chat. Some housekeeping rules and supportive information. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded and you are in listen-only mode. However, please do participate with the content by writing questions in the questions area of the dashboard. There will be a Q&A, a question and answer session at the end, and we will endeavor to answer as many questions as possible. After the webinar has finished, you will receive an email providing links for the APM webinar resources listed on the APM website. The email will also include a survey. We do ask if you're able to send us your feedback in the next 2 weeks. That would be greatly appreciated, so that we are able to improve these sessions as they're considered as CPD events for CPD records. For those that are all delegates are able to self-assess on their CPD records, which is a benefit to you all. With that said, please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Kay Sanders, CEO at CITI Limited. Thank you. Over to Kay.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can all hear me fine. Thank you, firstly, for including me in this very special week of International Women's Week. Inspiring inclusion to attract and retain a diverse workforce. It's important that we think about these things throughout the year, not just on one day. And to do that, I'm going to start off with a couple of statements that have been from very famous people that you probably all know, and you've heard these before, just to reinforce. Strength lies in differences, not in similarities. It's important to embrace that and understand that strength does lie in difference. We need diversity of thought in the world to face new challenges. The world is changing all of the time, and we ought to be evolving and developing at the same time. So strength lies in differences, not in similarities, is what I was showing you by Stephen Covey, followed by we need diversity of thought in the world to face new challenges. We also need to think about learning to enjoy and respect each other's differences, and acceptance is huge as part of what we're going to be thinking about and talking about this week. And finally, in diversity, there is beauty and there is strength. And if we perceive diversity and inclusion in that way, I think we can all make a better world for ourselves. So there is strength in the way in which we perceive and accept difference and diversity. I want to really start off as well thinking about the definitions of what inspire means, because the theme of International Women's Week this week is around inspiring inclusion to retain diverse workforces. And it's important that we're inspiring through inspiration. We're encouraging, we're motivating, we're stimulating new thought and new ideas, we're influencing, we're invigorating people, we're breathing. You know, it's about breathing. It's about really accepting ourselves and understanding ourselves, and really feeling somebody else with the urge to do something maybe different or something they really want to do. Inspiration is quite an important word for me, because inspiration is how I believe I've come through these years, and I've had lots of inspiring people around me through my culture, through my background, through the people that I'm related to, my ancestors. You know, I've come to this point and been inspired by various people, and that's important to me and how I think. Inclusion is also important, because people across varying identities, they are and they have to feel valued. They have to feel welcomed, respected, represented, heard, and they feel like they fully belong somewhere. And we can do that by opening our arms out and like really accepting people. They can be authentic, they can contribute, and they can have a voice. And when people feel that way, they can bring the very best of themselves. They should have equal access to opportunities. And again, that's something that we will cover over this kind of session. And I've only got 15 minutes, but we're trying to cover quite a lot. But throughout the week, I'm sure there'll be other discussions around these topic areas. So one of the things that I think is really important to differentiate is really the difference between equality, which is where groups are given the same resources and opportunities, and we kind of think about equity more these days. That is the recognition that people have different circumstances or come from different backgrounds or different kind of abilities, and we allocate the resources needed to reach an equal outcome to achieve that fairness. It's all well and good saying, but everyone got the same box. The same box doesn't matter if I'm 2 foot or 5 foot. You know, if the wall is too high and I'm not able to get over that wall, it's very difficult to get over hurdles when there's not equity. Equity can be where you're giving people the tools and that they need in order to get a fair chance to see the same world that other people are seeing. Realistically, what we want to get to is that we're removing all of these barriers and we're thinking about equality and equity together, that we are creating opportunity where there is a fairer playing field. And that's what we need to think about here, about the differences and about the definitions. The other thing that we need to understand is the dimensions of inclusion. There are many different things that we need to feel, that I've already covered some of them. We need to feel that we are supported in our thinking, we're connected, we're equal, we have access, we have a belonging, we have a place where we can say, actually, I can be my true authentic self. There is acceptance of that. I can participate and I can bring ideas and I can feel that togetherness where actually I'm included, I'm not excluded within a situation. So these kinds of things are important for us to think about in our workplace. So how do we actually talk about inclusion in the workplace? Leadership teams that I work with particularly are thinking now about creating roles where there are equity leads. There are people respectfully challenging the status quo. Not that this is how we've always done things. It's more about how do we want the future to look. There are now task forces in organisations that enable people to think about what they need to do in terms of creating the right kind of leadership opportunities for future leaders. And again, we help with some of the coaching and things like that around it. So inclusion around leadership and how we're going to future-proof and attract a diverse workforce is something that's really important. That leads me on to recruitment. It's important that the processes that we have are fair, that we are creating value of people and what they bring, and we understand that there needs to be some flexibility in working. I mean, COVID enforced us to kind of work differently and think differently, and I think that's kind of brought us forward somewhat in terms of the process and in terms of working practices. However, there is still some cynicism and some skepticism around, how people work and so on. So actually, trust and creating an environment of trust, creating an environment of psychological safety is something that is really important. We're undergoing a recruitment process at the moment, and I chose within that to hold what I've called blind, if I'm allowed to say blind even these days, I don't even know, blind applications, where we don't see the credentials, we just see the skill set and experience. So that's important for me to ensure that we're actually attracting the right kind of people, but also that our unconscious bias isn't getting in the way of who we then recruit. So that process I'm doing at the moment and undergoing, and I feel as if so far as we're halfway through the process, it's been pretty successful. It's been a really enlightening process for the applicants and for ourselves as well. We've learned a lot about ourselves within that time, and I want to continue doing so. Internal succession planning, development programs, coaching, accessibility to those is important. Ensuring that we are eliminating any restrictive barriers to some of these programs, and ensuring that we're really seeing coaching as something for everybody, not just for the elite or for certain levels of leadership and management. Coaching and creating a coaching culture is something that CITI specifically believes in, and we work with a lot of organisation. In actual fact, coaching and mentoring is really ingrained in all of our programs that we run with organisations, and we really do get people to think about how we can incorporate it and really get them to start thinking about creating a coaching style and culture. The other thing to really think about is that we're here to talk about inclusion. That means that we don't leave anybody out. And sometimes I hear that organisations are really positively discriminating, and I don't know if I agree with that or not. I think we need to create an environment where allyship is at the forefront. So people who have led the organisation traditionally are also assisting and supporting people to supporting other people through reverse mentoring programs, through other kind of programs that can help and develop allyship, where people start to understand each other, they start to work together, bringing people and communities together who might not normally have done so. So that's quite important in the conversation around inclusion in the workplace. I'd be interested in hearing some of your comments later in the question session, because I'd like to hear, how we're kind of evolving. That's really important. Change only happens when we understand ourselves. Understanding ourselves and understanding that we have a reflective system, which is controlled by process, and we have a reflexive system for automatic processing. Often it's unconscious and it's implicit. It requires little attention because it's the first practiced and known response that we have. And that's how we respond to change. That's how we respond to people that are different. That's how we respond to things that we don't understand. It's kind of that fear, really, or that not knowing, the unknown. So it's important that we kind of practice some of these things through our own progression and development. And being conscious of these things is important for us to kind of evolve. These things are shaped through our cultural learning, through our norms, through our language, through our values, through our behaviours, practices, and what we watch and read, really. It's important that we understand that a good diet isn't just about what we eat. It's also about how we conduct ourselves, what we intake, what we watch, how we converse, what language we feel is okay, what is our acceptable boundaries, all of these things. We're also shaped through historic group learning and cultural narrative, through our experiences, through our stories, through history and thematic beliefs. My cultural difference really kind of, for me, adds to my narrative. It's important that I use that in a positive way. And it's important that we all embrace it. It's important that we understand it, where we've come to, how we're here, and why we're here, and what's important to us. And we also want to ask those questions of other people and understand them better. Individual learning and narrative is also good in terms of individual experiences. Sometimes we'll have experienced traumas or bad kind of experiences that we bring to the fore, and actually that shapes our thinking. Social and institutional learning, schools that we went to, colleges, universities, if we did go to university, how we've educated ourselves, how we learn what we learn. patterns of historic behaviour in institutional kind of organisations and so on, what kind of culture we work within, and how we can change some of those and break some of the norms that have been culturally acceptable before, but they might not be anymore. So change is important. So we're also identifying areas where we could be vulnerable. The vulnerabilities come from things like groupthink. So that's when we kind of employ similar looking and feeling and thinking people. Therefore, we get the same people working in our organisations, having the same kind of conversations, selecting the same project teams that aren't going to be difficult, that are going to be easy to make decisions with, and so on. But is that the right thing to do? Is that okay? What I've seen in past experience is that actually having a diverse team helps to think differently. It helps to really challenge some thinking, which actually might help with the project or with that community later on. Thinking differently and some conflict done in a respectful way can really help to sort out problems, to really look at what the solution should be, and identify any risks for the future. Successful projects can only happen if we can eliminate some groupthink, and we can only do that through engaging a more diverse and inclusive team. So that's something that I think as our community we should think about when we're thinking about change, in any kind of change, cultural change, systemic change, anything like that at all. I do use these, if anyone's heard me speak before about the growth mindset. I'm not going to talk about it for too long because I'm just conscious of the time today that we have. So it's important that we understand that having a growth mindset enables us to be inspired, to lead and take others, take challenges on, to try new things, to really help us to grow our minds and to learn and to understand ourselves and the wider community and the world. Failure to limit ourselves, failure to kind of understand ourselves and sticking with a fixed mindset, people that don't like to be challenged. I mean, nobody likes to be challenged to some extent, but I think respectful challenge and learning how to have debates and conversations is really important. These days, I think people are quite fearful of offending, so therefore they shy away from conversation. Actually, we should be creating an environment where we can talk and we can ask questions and we can support each other by learning through each other. And that's something that a growth mindset would give us, but a fixed mindset would not. So this is why it's important to have a think about how we think and what we can do to challenge ourselves from time to time. I have written a poem, and I'm sorry it's coming up line for line because I wrote it quite late last night when I was thinking about today, and I'm hoping that you will really think about things, and this will inspire you to do what we want to do this week, which is debate, talk, understand, change, and support each other. So here I go. Inspire inclusion in your teams. It's not difficult as it seems. It's easy sometimes just to spend life fearful, trying not to offend. But why do we put up imaginary walls when we can ask people what they prefer to be called? Don't you think it makes so much sense if we mature, are open and really commence creating some equity and becoming allies rather than opting to ignore or to disenfranchise? We sometimes don't know and are worried to ask, or we try to fit in, ignore feelings, wear a mask. Whilst we behave like this, we won't change ways of working, carry on feeling out of place while the biases keep lurking. Together, let's learn. Let's talk and debate about the richness of difference, and let's educate. Model good behaviour, be open, honest and fair. Show those who are fearful or live in despair that life is a tapestry of colourful difference, a rainbow of creativity, of true magnificence. If only we can combat the misconceptions and fear and things we don't understand, we prefer to keep clear. Let's celebrate our uniqueness. Let everyone see the trueness of diversity and letting people be. Thank you for inviting me today to impart my insights, experience that comes straight from the heart. I hope that we encourage, challenge, yet respect. I hope we think differently. We question and reflect. Let's use our differences to ignite change for the good. Make it the norm to be heard and feel understood. I hope that kind of surmises what I wanted to say today. And I hope that you understand that this is coming from a really good place, that we really want to challenge the status quo, but we want everybody included within that conversation. Whether you are feeling marginalised, we want you to be heard. And if you're feeling as if you're not heard anymore, we want you to stand up and be an ally for what the changes, afoot can bring. The diversity of thought, the inspiration that we can give in terms of inclusion. It's really important that we understand that the future generations should have equity and they should be understood. They should be listened to. And there should be an inclusion for all areas of life. So please, let's try and make a difference for ourselves and for the future generations. I just want to say thank you ever so much. I hope I've done my 15 minutes of justice, and this is what we kind of use to make the changes happen within our organisations, the Change Diamond. If you'd like to talk to us, please do. We're CITI Limited, and I'm Kalpna Sanders, or Kay, as people know me. And I'm very happy to talk to anybody afterwards. If you'd like to have a conversation with me, I'm more than willing to do so. Thank you so much for listening. And I think I'm going to pass back to Laura.
Thank you so much, Kay, and a very, very warm welcome to everyone who's joined us on the line. That was absolutely brilliant, absolutely fantastic way to start today's conversation, so thank you, Kay. So for those I haven't met, my name is Laura Ewen. I'm a director in KPMG's Major Projects Advisory team. I specialise in complex programme management in both the capital investment and transformational spaces, and I have a particular interest in the human side of how projects are delivered. And that extends internally to my role within KPMG, where I'm director of our culture programme across our infrastructure advisory group of around 400 colleagues, looking at everything, including inclusion, diversity and equity. And it extends personally for me as well. I'm a huge champion of invisible disabilities as someone who lives with type 1 diabetes myself. I'm extremely proud to be a female in our brilliant profession of project management, and I was absolutely honoured to be asked today to help facilitate a really, really important conversation today around how we continue to inspire inclusion across our profession. And can I just say, wow, what a brilliant panel we have today. A big thank you again to Kay for such an authentic and inspiring way to start our conversation today. I particularly love the sentiments around equity, allyship, and the poem. We've got a lot of love coming in on the chat for you, Kay, around your poem, so thank you again for that. And a very warm welcome to all our panellists. We're going to meet them and hear some quick introductions in a moment, but before we do, I think I'm right in saying that this is a record-breaking registration and attendance for this event, so thank you again for joining today. Please get your questions coming in. We've already had some great ones lined up for the Q&A, which we'll try and save as much time as we can for later in the session. We really want you to feel part of today's conversation as much as we are. So without further ado, let's meet our other panellists, and we're going to start with an introduction from Yetunde.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yetunde Adeshile. I sit on the APM Board of Trustees. I'm a director at Emmanuel Ltd, which is a project management and leadership consultancy, coaching and training organizations where we provide services to corporate organizations and non-corporate organisations, so we do individuals. And I'm also a director for a couple of charities as well. I like to get myself involved with charitable works. And yeah, I'm here to be a panelist today, as one of the panelists today, to speak about inclusion and inspiring inclusion. And to be quite honest with you, my journey has been one of inspiration even to myself sometimes, and it's a case of just being making yourself available, continuous development. Looking after yourself, looking up to people that have gone ahead of you, and seeing, how you can do what you can do for yourself. So I think it's just a quick introduction, so I'll leave it there.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Yetunde. And we'll have plenty of time to share some of your experiences and insights. And just to reassure you, those technical issues happen to the best of us, so not a problem at all. Fabulous. Let's introduce Belle.
Hi, lovely to meet you. My name is Belle French. I'm a project manager for Gleeds. We're a consultancy that works in construction, and I work in the infrastructure team, where I work mainly in secondments with infrastructure clients. Just to give a bit of a background, I started my career doing an apprenticeship. I also did my chartership 2 years ago, and just over a year ago joined the Board of Trustees with Yetunde. And I guess one of my special interests is looking at barriers to the project profession, and looking at accessibility routes, whether that's in terms of gender balance, whether that's in terms of neurodiversity, and accessing through the routes that I did through an apprenticeship, and looking at that. So yeah, I'm really excited for this discussion today.
Brilliant. Great to have you, Belle. Sacha, hi.
Hi, Laura. Hi, everybody. I'm Sacha Hind. I'm a Senior Programme Manager for Network Rail. I manage a team of 40 project professionals who mainly deliver national business change programmes, both across Network Rail, which is a large organisation of 40,000 employees, but also across the wider rail industry as well. Outside of work, I am parent to a 12-year-old son, so very much a working parent, and have been since I returned from maternity leave. And I've spent all of my career working in male-dominated industries. So I'm particularly interested in gender equality, hence being here today, but also social mobility. Thank you.
Thank you, Sacha. And Jenny.
Hi, so I'm Jenny McLaughlin. I'm a project manager at Heathrow Airport. I've been in aviation for over 20 years. It wasn't something I particularly picked on early in my life, but something I fell into and have loved ever since. I am now the inclusion lead in Solutions, which is a function within Heathrow delivering infrastructure, technology, business change and procurement. And I'm also now a governor for Harrow Richmond Uxbridge College. I mean, particularly looking at how we can inspire inclusion through the programmes and governance and pathways into employment for those with SEN requirements. I'm ADHD and dyslexic, and believe that the way that my brain is wired gives assets to companies that I work for. And I'm very passionate about making sure that that is coming across within everything that I do.
Fantastic. Very warm welcome, Jenny, and to all our panellists. And can I just say what a fantastic diversity we've got just on our panel today. So really great to have and see you guys on today. So look, inclusion is such a key ingredient to driving high performance in our project teams, and there's significant power, as we heard from Kay, in unlocking the benefits of a diverse team through fostering inclusivity. And I really feel there's a symbiotic relationship between driving inclusion and the quality and diversity of our skills and our people on our projects, and retaining those talented skills on our projects as well. So today we're going to hear insight, experiences, tips and advice from our panel, how we can drive this important agenda forward in our profession, both individually and collectively. So with that, let's get straight into some of the Q&As. And Sacha and Jenny, if it's okay, I'm going to start with both of you, just to share some experiences around a time where you've perhaps witnessed or experienced a lack of inclusion or indeed exclusion, and a little bit about how that impacted you or made you feel at the time. And if it's okay, Sacha, we start with yourself.
Yeah, that's no problem at all. So I'll be talking a bit about my lived experience, which, as I mentioned, is about being a woman who spent 20 years working in male-dominated environments. So firstly, I spent 10 years in policing. I've now spent 10, nearly 11 years in the railway, actually. For the last 7 years in particular, I've been a single parent, but I've been a working parent for 11 years. And working as a woman in a male-dominated environment as a parent is a really interesting challenge, because there is a lot of unintentional exclusion. So, for example, simple things like meetings regularly being organised at times that just aren't compatible with childcare commitments, or, you know, meetings that are, would require me to travel sort of 2 hours and start at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. It's just not possible when you're doing a nursery or a school run. And I've found myself in the position quite regularly being not just the only woman in the room, but the only one raising those kinds of conflicts or those kinds of challenges. Although, you know, a lot of the men in the room will be parents, it's still the reality in 2024 that it's mainly women who pick up caring responsibilities in the home, whether that's childcare, caring for elderly parents, anything like that. So found myself being in the position of not just being the only woman, but the only one raising those kinds of issues and those kinds of topics. I think the other challenge for me has been the assumption that once you have one child, people assume you're going to have more children. And again, that's not, you know, been my reality or my situation. There has kind of been an assumption that, you know, on returning to work, I would want to work part-time. Of course I would, because I'm the woman and the mother. So, you know, of course I want to work part-time. And again, that wasn't my choice. I've always worked full-time and really enjoyed being a working parent. That's my choice. Also that I would be less focused on my role or less interested in promotion because I now have other priorities. And again, if anything for me, becoming a parent gave me an extra sort of incentive to progress and do well at work. So that's a bit about my lived experience. I can talk a bit about the impact of that, if you'd like me to, Lauren, sort of how I've dealt with that, if that'd be helpful. So I guess the impact for me on that was it did make me question whether it would be possible to progress my career and still be the kind of parent I wanted to be, i.e. a very hands-on sort of present parent who could go to the school plays and go to parents' evening and those kinds of things. So for a while it made me feel like that perhaps wasn't a possibility. And what I would say is it absolutely is. You just need to pick the right places to work and the right people to work for. And if it's not working for you, make a change, because there absolutely are workplaces and great line managers who will be flexible and recognise that flexibility works both ways. So you can have it all, and don't believe anybody who tells you can't. It also made me question at times whether I was a bad parent for wanting a career, as well as having a child, because there is that assumption in society that, you know, if you're the woman, you're the main caregiver. And so it did make me question at times, you know, whether I was a good parent. But my child is turning out to be quite a nice person, so I think I've done all right on that front as well. As I mentioned, you know, ultimately what it gave me, I suppose I'm a bit stubborn, so it gave me a bit more determination that I was going to be able to achieve all of those things. And I've been lucky to have great people around me that have supported and helped me with that. And I think it's really important for my son as a young male to see me working hard, providing he knows that he's a really important part of my life, but so is work. And I think that's really good for him to see. I think as well, though, one of the things that's really important that we talk about today is not just the kind of psychological impact or the barriers it puts in place for women progressing, but also the very real financial impact. So we talk a lot about gender pay gaps when it comes to women at work, but actually what we're seeing more and more conversation around is the pension pay gap. And I'm really, really pleased to see the focus on that, because the reality is that the pension pay gap, or the pension gap, is twice the gender pay gap. And that is because women are more likely to work part-time. They're more likely to work in lower paid industries. they're more likely to take time out to bring their families. So currently 60% of divorced women and 75% of single mothers, and I'm both of those, are not on track for at least a minimum lifestyle when they retire. And I think that's something we need to recognise and talk about and address more at work, because that really will affect women for the rest of their lives. And so I think that's a really important topic to highlight. And one of the things I would encourage anybody who's a line manager on the call to do is to have the same conversations with men who are returning to work as new parents as we do with women. So what I see is when women return to work after having a child, line managers are very proactive at offering up flexible working and adjustments, which is great. But I don't see line managers proactively having the same conversations with men returning to work who've just had children. And until we afford fathers the same opportunities around flexibility and flexible working as we do with women, we won't get gender equality for anyone. So I think if there's one thing that line managers on the call can take away, it would be to be really proactive in that space. Don't accept those social norms, but challenge them, have those conversations. Don't wait to be asked, raise the topic, encourage, support.
Brilliant. I think there'll be a big theme actually through today around driving the conversation. It's really insightful, great examples, and thank you for being so open, Sacha. Brilliant. Jenny.
Hi, thank you. And I echo a lot of what you said, resonates with me, Sacha. So yes, I'm sure your son is absolutely amazing if he's being raised by you. So I'm going to go on a slightly different perspective. There's lots of instances I could refer to, particularly being in aviation, as you say, it's male dominated as well as construction. And for me, the big thing that really started me on my journey to talk about and look at inclusion from a different lens was I was going out onto site as the project manager, doing my normal health and safety walk round, and I was asked to walk across some section of rebar, and I knew in my gut I wasn't safe. Absolutely knew I was not safe walking across it, but I did it anyway, and I smiled and I talked as I was doing it, and I got to the other side and I was so relieved I didn't break my ankle or twist my leg or whatever. But I didn't tell anyone, because I didn't want anyone to think that I wasn't competent or capable enough to do my job because I couldn't do that activity. Because I couldn't, my size foot as a size 5 was not designed to walk across rebar that was designed like that. And as I was sat reflecting on it a few weeks later, I suddenly realised, if I'm not competent, if I'm not comfortable or able to talk about the fact that I didn't feel safe and I was excluded from that activity, how many other people on site are feeling exactly the same way? And I'm the client. I'm the person who can make that possible. I'm the one who should be leading that conversation, and I didn't even do it. And it started me on a journey to understand much more about where these exclusions are happening. But because we've normalised that exclusion, because we've said it is okay, because that's the way we've always designed it to be built, that's the way we've always designed the process to happen. This is just how it is, Jenny. This is how we do things, and this is what makes it work. Well, no. And as project managers, I think we have the key role here to be able to change it just within our job. If we can project management out the exclusion, if we can understand and ask the question and anticipate the diversity that we want within our teams, we can anticipate the design that they need in order to be able to thrive in our organisations. So for me, it's very much about that feeling in your gut, that feeling that you get when you know something isn't quite right, but you've squeezed it down so many times that you're no longer listening to it. Start to listen to it, start to feel it, and start to voice it. Because the more of us who voice that feeling, the more of us who ask those questions, particularly as project managers, the more we can, through the delivery of our change, deliver something that is truly transformational, because we're truly taking in those needs of the very different people around us.
Fantastic. And there is such power in how we set up projects and run projects. I completely agree with that. And Sacha touched on the concept of psychological safety and how we can establish that in our project environments as well. But really, really insightful. Thank you, Jenny. I am curious about the neurodivergent lens as well, which we'll come back to later on in the follow-up questions as well. Fantastic. Thank you, Sacha and Jenny. So let's hear from Yetunde and Belle. Yetunde, I'll start with yourself if that's okay. So it's brilliant to hear about your fabulous and very diverse career experiences in your introduction. It would be great to sort of now turn to the benefits of what true inclusion and inclusive environments looks like, and get your thoughts on what those benefits are, and any particular consequences if we don't have inclusion or inclusive environments in place.
So to be quite honest with you, for me, I think for some people we experience intersectionality where there's more than one way we could be included. And for me, the importance of inclusion is it's rich, and it brings great creativity, and not everyone thinks the same way, and then it allows you to be more innovative, and more considerate. It makes you more caring, it makes you more sensitive, especially to those who are around you. If we didn't have, I mean, if I go back in the early days of project management, like Sacha, I started off in the railway industry, and got myself in a lot of positions that I was the only woman, I was the only black woman, I was the only everything. It was just me. And sometimes when you find yourself in a board meeting and you're sitting there with all men, it can get a bit of a difficult conversation. So I've had issues of childcare, but look at the way childcare is now gone. Look at the way we are now. UK is now having organizations that are inclusive and thinking about women that have children. And now it's not just about the women, it's about the men also, to say that actually every parent is responsible for the development of every child. And that's so important for the children that are now being raised. When probably like Sacha, my kids are, my eldest is 24. So 24 years ago, it was quite a traumatic experience. But because people like us have come and say, no, it's just not doable. We've got school runs to do, we've got this to do. And then some people, as a result, because they couldn't speak out, left work. And that shouldn't be, it shouldn't have been a decision that they'd had to make. If you want to be in the workplace needs to be accommodating enough for you to be able to work, even though you have children. And then all of a sudden, it's not just the women that have children. So a lot of voices have come up. And now look at what we experience today. Now, a few years ago, none of us could have been able to work from home. We would literally have to physically go to our workplaces and work. But again, technology has come, and technology has made us more inclusive, in the sense that, I mean, when there was lockdown, everybody was working from home, which demonstrated that actually we don't need to physically go into the office. And then until you have somebody that has a disability that can't, is not as mobile as everybody else, you won't be considerate. Maybe, I used to work in an old building where there was no lifts. You have to walk up the stairs. And I wouldn't, though I wanted to complain because I personally didn't want to walk up the steps, but nobody ever thought of it, that actually there might be somebody that can't walk up the stairs. And it takes somebody else to have an injury to say, well, I've got a bad leg, I can't walk up the stairs. And it then makes you realize that actually, what about those people that are not, it's just a physical disability. There's nothing wrong with their brains. They can still function and they can still work. So it brought around the diversity, and the inclusion that we have today is what we see in the workplaces and in the corporations today. If one organization didn't employ a woman and try to make life easier for her, other organizations will never see the benefit, and they will never realize that actually you don't have to start work at 8. You can start at 10, do your school runs and then come to work, and then you can still go home at 4 and do a couple of hours when you get home. So I think inclusion has helped every organization to think outside the box. And we needed to think outside the box. And thank God we did, because when pandemic came, we had no choice but to move everything online. And if people hadn't been thinking along those lines, then actually we would have all been excluded when it came to pandemic, because there would have been no way of doing things. So inclusion brings about creativity, innovation, and it actually brings about, I think, better productivity out of people. So when they know they've got the flexibility, they can work, the flexibility in work, the creativity, they have a voice, they can say, they can comfortably voice their opinions at work. Even that in itself is something and credible to any organization that makes allowance for that.
Brilliant. And I think everything you said will resonate with our audience. It certainly did with me, and great builds on Jenny's point around challenging the norm and Sacha's points around, starting the conversation. There's still more we can do, but great to hear of the progress there. Fantastic. Thank you, Yetunde. Belle, let's turn to you if that's okay. So you talked in your introduction about your really interesting career and how you entered the world of project management through the apprenticeship route as your foundation. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around how we individually, collectively across our profession can really build that inclusive and diverse pipeline of future talent and employees within our project organisations or indeed organisations generally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much that we can do, and I think firstly I want to talk about outreach. So going to schools, going to careers fairs. Project management just isn't a career that a lot of kids naturally think about, and the best way that I describe it to kids is they have projects at school, they talk about project management at school, and everyone's fighting over who gets to lead their class project, and very few of them go away and think, oh yeah, that's actually a career that I want to do, because people don't connect it necessarily with the career in its own right. You think about the industry, you think about the sector, and so planting those seeds goes a long way in terms of people thinking about it in a career, in terms of getting people into apprenticeships. And the other thing is about making sure that people aren't leaving. I've seen people over the years drift off because, not necessarily, I don't think a project profession to be at fault, but maybe a sector thing within construction. I think people don't necessarily listen to the apprentices. They think that they know what's best for them because they're senior leadership, but they don't actually talk to the apprenticeship about the needs. And those needs have changed a lot. So even when I started, I only started my career back in 2017, which was not long ago, but it was pre-pandemic, and the challenges that I had as an apprentice are completely different to those that the apprentices are facing now. So I think talking to them and learning it. I know Kay touched upon reverse mentoring, and I think the best way to reduce barriers and to build that pipeline of diverse talent is to listen to the people that are in post now, who are our apprentices, who are our graduates, what are their challenges, and support them, because the more supportive we are to the people that we have, the more that will improve and get better, and it will be a more attractive career and future for our industries. And especially from Sacha working in rail, I work in rail too, and we've got massively reducing workforce because of the retiring numbers. So having to bring in people in that way is really what we need to do more as a profession.
It's a critical enabler for our industry, isn't it? That really, really great insight. And actually, one of the questions that came through, Belle, was it's for Kay to just expand on what she meant by reverse mentoring. So I don't know if actually you could take that question and just sort of expand on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about having conversations both ways. I have started my career really young, but I have spotted gaps in our industry, within different businesses, that because other people more senior in the business have always done it a certain way, it wouldn't necessarily have been something that they've challenged. But because of, as Jenny mentioned, diverse brain, I have ADHD as well, I spot things that sometimes other people haven't necessarily challenged in the past. And so making the most of people with diverse neurodiversity and just different backgrounds, histories. We look at different things and we challenge different things. So reverse mentoring is similarly to mentoring, but it's more about listening to what we can do to improve and valuing someone's opinion based on their experience, regardless of their level. So we look at people at kind of lower grades, learn a lot from what they're saying, and then use experience further down the line to then implement that going forward.
Brilliant, thank you.
Kay's jumped on as well.
Kay's rejoined. Kay, did you have any builds on that around reverse mentoring and the importance of it?
Absolutely. I just think, it's really lovely to hear that, Belle, that you've been experiencing that. I think it's such a positive thing to do within organisations. We work with a lot of engineering organisations. We work with some of the organisations that are represented here as well. And having the understanding and creating opportunities for people that are at different parts of their career or different. We're working within 5 different levels of generations really within our workplaces these days. So actually there's so much change that's happened that somebody within a certain generation might not understand the whole piece around LGBTQ kind of areas or other areas, and it's about bringing people together in a safe space where they learn from each other, and you're almost setting up an opportunity for people to understand and break down some of the barriers that people have that they wouldn't ordinarily mix with different generations in the outside world. So it's creating those opportunities in a safe way that enables people to learn from each other and create an opportunity to create to break down barriers and understand. It's so positive when I've seen it work well. So it's important that it does work well, and organisations are cottoning on to it a bit more and doing more of it. So if anybody wants to talk about how to, then more than happy to have that conversation.
And there's huge, going back to the conversation with Yetunde, huge benefit and impact from reverse mentorship schemes. So brilliant, great question as well. So we are running slightly over. I'm going to turn to the Q&As. Had some good questions coming in. I'll field them for some quick fire responses from our panel. So I'll start with Sacha and Yetunde. So this is a good question around how can we be more actively inclusive in our projects? Sacha, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, sure. I'll try and be nice and quick, Laura. Tell me if you need me to wrap it up. So I think the first thing is, it goes back to what you mentioned earlier, Laura, about psychological safety. I think the most important thing we can do is create really psychologically safe environments for people. And I think that's as simple as starting with conversation. So we need to build EDI into the conversations we have every day. So every one-to-one in my team starts with talking about the person before we get on to anything to do with the work. Having EDI moments at team meetings and varying who presents those, because they bring such different experiences and areas of focus. And also having, and I know we talked about this, Laura, having, creating communities of people that care. So if you work for a large organisation like I do, there'll often be employee networks or champions or allies in certain areas. So creating communities of people that care about this and prepared to lend their voice to it, I think is really important. I really liked what Belle said earlier and what Kay touched on in her presentation about mentoring and outreach programs. So there are lots more leadership and mentoring programs now that are aimed at people from minority backgrounds. That's been really helpful for people in my team to sort of build their confidence and their presence in work. And the outreach programs that Belle mentioned, Belle, I couldn't agree with you more. I spend so much time doing stuff with schools because schools just don't talk about project management as a profession. And if we want to replace that ageing workforce, we want people to choose projects as a career. I think we all have a responsibility to go and talk to young people about that, and particularly people from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds. So the Talent Foundry is a great organisation to work with. If you're interested in doing that kind of thing, take a look at their website. And it's also good for teaching my PMs how to mentor and coach people. So my junior PMs get to practice sort of mentoring and coaching people in the area of project management as well. And then finally, and this goes back to the example that you talked about, Jenny, is using diversity impact assessments for all of our projects. So really making a conscious effort to look at the work that we're delivering and how we're delivering it through an EDI lens. writing that down, really taking the time to think about it, and inviting challenge and conversation and feedback from others is really important, because the example you use, Jenny, is just one that we hear so much, particularly in industries like you and I work in. Everything's built for men, and so if we don't, and you know, non-disabled people, all that kind of thing. So if we want that to change, then when we're delivering our projects, we really need to make a conscious effort to look at it through that lens, invite challenge and conversation right at the start, because pretty much every time we do that, it changes our requirements slightly and means that what we deliver is far more inclusive for people.
Brilliant, some really top tips there. Thank you, Sacha. So we are running really short of time. I think we've only got 4 minutes left or so. So Yetunde, in a sort of quick fire answer, any tips from you around really actively encouraging that inclusive dynamic in our projects?
I think to be doing inclusivity, we just need to be very, very mindful of everybody and every circumstance around us, and just to make sure that everybody has a stay at the table. So, for example, if you're having a meeting, you notice somebody's a bit quiet, regardless of what, ask them a question to invite them into the conversation, because it's not that easy to get involved with the discussions that is going on. You can ask a question, you can, have a conversation. And if you see somebody in the office that seems to be spending more time alone than in conversation with other people, try and engage in a conversation with them. That's the way, to be quite honest with you, that's the way I've always done inclusive, is, spotting out who's the one that is not included and why they're not included. One of the things that I've always done, and in some places I got into trouble for it, but like Valentine's Day, I would encourage people to bring different food from their different countries. And then you'd find out where people are actually from, without you assuming that that's where they're from because of maybe the way they look, the way they feel, and you've been treating somebody because you think they're this and actually they're not. So it gives people the opportunity to be included, share something about their culture, their background. Most of my inclusion practice has always been around diversity, as in equality and diversity in race. So I'm very hot on spotting when it comes to race. But of course, there's different ways that we're all diverse in different ways, and there's a lot of things that we need to take into consideration. So if somebody's got a learning disability, they've let you know. Be mindful of that when you're having conversations with them and when you're setting them tasks. Don't expect them to do whatever everybody else is doing in the same time because they've just told you. If somebody's got childcare issues, be mindful of that and be accommodating, and don't make them feel bad because they might have to go home earlier one day to do the school rounds or whatever it is. Everything's not always going to go smoothly in organizations, in projects. But if you're a leader in a project or a manager that manages a team, be conscious of what your team is made up of the diversity that you have in your team, and actually learn how to use it to your advantage. So it's not all negative. There are some aspects of that diversity that you have in your team that brings about positivity. And you as a manager need to be conscious of that and maximize that so that you can get the best outcome for your project.
Yeah, and benefit from the strengths of the collective and the diversities. I love that. So we are at time. If it's okay, just take a couple of extra minutes, just quick fire round through our panelists around what would your top golden tip be for our audience around how we can individually or collectively on our projects really drive inclusivity on our projects or in our team. So I'll start with Jenny. To put you on the spot, Jenny.
All right. So my top tip would be to be real, not perfect. I think by sharing our humanness and our vulnerability with our teams and with our wider organisations, we inspire others too as well. And by doing that, we can then build on our own experience to understand and better anticipate how to design for difference.
Love that. I love that. Belle.
I'd say get to know your team and learn about challenges that each person has. I talk openly with my team about the challenges that I have and how that affects me. And I think the more that you can understand what challenges individual people have, then you can help support where it's appropriate to help overcome those or help support them with their goals, and just listening to what those are and making sure that you're there to support rather than to take over and lead, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Listening so important. Brilliant. Thanks, Belle. Kay.
I'd say don't assume, ask.
Yeah. Love that. Don't assume, ask. I really like that. Yetunde.
I think my 2 words would be visibility and representation. Be visible for your team and represent them well, because that's the only way you can be inclusive. If they've got challenges that they need upper powers to approve or say something about, represent them and be a good representation, because you are their voice. And that way they feel more comfortable, and they feel, you'll probably get more out of them as well. So yeah, visibility and representation.
Fantastic. And Sacha.
My takeaway would be to say that every single person who's on this webinar today is here because they care about this topic, and everybody here has the ability to make a massive difference to the people that they come into contact with day to day, and I think we all have a responsibility to be part of the change that we want to see. I would say that you are never too young or too early on in your career or too inexperienced to be able to make a real difference. So just lend your voice to the things that matter to you and the people around you. Check in with people. We had some great advice a minute ago about, noticing when someone's not, looking themselves from Yetunde. But also don't be afraid to call out poor and exclusionary behaviour.
Brilliant. So we're over time. I've just got a few words to wrap up. I think one of my key takeaways was I love one of the phrases that Kay shared around strength lying in differences, not in similarities. I think that was really, really insightful. And it's been so powerful to come together today as a project profession to celebrate International Women's Day. People make projects, so ensuring we create inclusive environments is a key driver to how we continue to deliver the amazing things that we do for our society around us. And I think the wise words of APM are, when projects succeed, society benefits. So let's keep leading the change. It goes without saying a huge thank you again to Kay, our fantastic keynote speaker, all of our panellists, Belle, Jenny, Yetunde and Sacha, and of course the Association of Project Management, the APM Women in Project Management and the APM Scotland branch volunteers for organising this session. We'd love to stay in touch with everyone who joined. We had hundreds of colleagues from across the industry logging on today, so connect with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. I hope this session has left you with some really practical tips and insights as to how we can drive inclusivity across our workplace, both in the workplace and in our personal lives as well, and how we can use inclusion and diversity to drive our future talent pipeline in our profession. So let's keep the conversation going, let's keep raising awareness, and let's keep challenging the norm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day.